Well, welcome back. This is part three of our three-part series, chapter three of Frank Smalinger's Criminology, third edition, Pearson Education. So we left off talking about some more modern biological theories. Next week, we're actually going to be talking about the biosocial perspective and other contemporary perspective. So we're going to get into some more issues, human genome product, genetics and heredity, dysfunctional brain, body chemistry, and criminality. So even though the last section was entitled modern, it meant closer to now, like starting in the 60s. Most of the modern stuff in chapter 3 has to do with the 60s. Although I did mention at the very beginning, and it's not in that chapter, but it is in chapter 4 for the third edition, is the work of Adrian Raine at the University of Pennsylvania, and his book, which I did mention previously, this one here, Anatomy of Violence, Biological Roots of Crime. Excellent book. I highly recommend that you take a time to read it. Professor Raine has been studying the brain for his entire career, a really, really long time, and it's well worth it. I did post some information about videos we watched last night with him, interviews with him. Make sure that's available for you so that you can watch that and be up with what we did last night in class. So let's look now at what are the criticisms. You probably have some idea already of some criticisms. Think about feeling the skull. Is that really a way to tell whether the bumps on somebody's skull going to tell you whether somebody's a criminal or not? The length of their arms, how big their hands are. That was actually a big thing in the presidential campaign, if you might remember, with the Republicans, where I think between Marco Rubio and now President Trump talking about what big hands might indicate. But it really doesn't tell us a lot as far as behavior is concerned. You have some gentle giants, guys that are really big and strong and huge hands, and wouldn't hurt a fly. And then you have people that are large and muscular and strong who would kill you at the drop of a hat. So can you really tell by looking at the person's body type or body style or size as to what kind of person they're going to be? The guy if I know anybody saw Jurassic Park, you had that one guy that was working in the computer guy who stole the DNA. He was a little bit bigger than me, a little overweight, out of shape, and he had a criminal mind. He had some really bad ideas. Does that mean everybody who's in that condition is going to think that way? No. So there's some criticisms you might think about right away with regard to the body type issues. So, and this is starting on page 53 of chapter 3 of this textbook. So some of the criticisms of early biological theories of criminal behavior. We have all early biological theories of criminal behavior. They seem to regulate the role of free will to the philosophical dustbin. In other words, you threw it in the trash. You said, no, we got these biological theories. Free will goes in the trash. People don't make choices. These theories we've come up with, and we scientifically verified these theories, and people don't have a choice. It's what they're born with. It's what's in their head, what's in their brain. That's what makes people commit crimes. So that's a critique, is that basically these theories come along and say, you know what, people don't make choices, which makes it hard if we were to be following these theories today. If nobody's responsible, what do we do with them? How do we hold them accountable for stuff that we say they're not responsible for? And the work of Adrian Raine, which I talked about, which is more present day work, addresses some of the same issues. If we find that people are even if you say less responsible because of issues that they had, whether it's a brain injury, whether it's a tumor in the brain, chemical imbalance in the brain because of alcoholism or drug use, which then led to or increased the likelihood, if you will, of this behavior. Did they not have a choice? Did they turn into little robots? That's a critique, is we basically take away the idea that people have free will. And that debate is going on now with the resurgence of some of these biological issues. And we're finding through research that there certainly are issues in biology that do affect how people act. Some say, no, crime is a social construction and it varies from place to place, and biology can't possibly explain it all. And we did talk early on in the course about social relativity, and we know that how people look at crime even varies by culture. You know, in some cultures, I think we mentioned before, if someone dishonors the family, it's okay to kill them. Not necessarily in this country, but in some other cultures. And you have that clash of cultures. If someone comes from one of those cultures and moves into the United States and kills the daughter because she's dating someone outside of their race or culture, ethnicity, whatever, or outside their religion. So one of the critiques is that, you know, biology doesn't explain everything because there are social things going on as well. Another critique is it's unlikely that any biological feature or combination could explain the wide variety of criminal offending. You look at all the different types of crime that we have, and how can, you know, you explain it by bumps on the skull or big hands or big earlobes or whatever? It just doesn't seem to make sense, and that's one of the critiques. What they suggest, a more sensible approach, which is what we're really looking at more currently, is look at those biological influences that certain criminals share. You take the similar characteristics, what makes the difference? Now, think about it. They suggest you look at law violators and law enforcers. Is it the nature of the environment that they grew up in that makes one decide to become a criminal, another decide to become a cop? And you look at, you know, you have some really buff prisoners in the prison system, you know, and you have some really buff cops. So what made the difference? Apparently not their physical approach. Was it a combination of their physical approach and ability to how they were raised and how they were grown up, that they should use these tools in a positive way or use these tools in a negative way? Although it's also suggested that it's going to be very difficult to be able to identify features that only criminals have. And is there really going to be, is that something that's possible? You know, is there one feature that you can say all criminals have, or one feature that only criminals have? Personally, I don't think so, and I haven't seen any evidence to suggest. Certainly there are features, as you watch the Adrian Rain video that I mentioned, and there are features that people have that affect their decision-making process, that make them more likely. But at the same time, you have people that have the same issues that do not commit crimes. So chapter summaries are early proponents of biological theories basically argued that some human behavior is a result of biological propensities that were inherited from more primitive developmental stages in our process. And this is probably, you can find this list at the beginning of the chapter. There's a nice little graphic there with the presumptions. Contemporary biosocial theory suggests human behavior is a result of interactions between biology and the features of the physical and social environments. So here you may have someone who maybe they have a not well-functioning prefrontal cortex. And Adrian Rain says that it's like the brakes on the car. You don't have the brakes, you're more likely to run off the road. So you have somebody that has that issue, and then they're in a really wild environment, and they're more likely to act out. where you have somebody else that has the same issue with the prefrontal cortex, and they're in a very supportive environment, and maybe they don't act out. So biosocial theories, as we will be looking at next week, suggest that there's an interaction between the biological issues that someone might have and the environment in which they live or grow up in. Biological theories advance the basic determinants of human behavior are constitutionally or psychologically based. In other words, based upon how we're built or how our brain is made. They were built upon positivism, looking things in scientific study. Sociobiology is a perspective that applies to evolutionary theory and social behavior. Remember, Lorenz said that we were more instinctive and that we had some behaviors that you could see across the board in all kinds of organisms. Sociobiologists look at how the groups interact and what the group instinct, the tribalism, the altruism, the territoriality, where we're trying to protect the genetic makeup and pass it along for future generations. We also discussed eugenics. Some criminologists fear that if we accept biological theories of crime, and that issue is going to be going on today with some of the newer stuff in biological theory, that we might have another round of eugenics where we say, hey, if we can really say that people with a damaged prefrontal cortex are more likely to commit crime, maybe we should put them all on an island somewhere. Or if they come up with some kind of feature that most people who are criminals have, do we separate them from society? Do we not allow them to reproduce to continue that line? People fear that. And hopefully that's not the idea, unless, of course, there's some science that absolutely positively proves that there is a characteristic that can be stopped. But now we're going to be talking about the human genome next week, and now we find that we can actually make changes. So who knows where that science is going to go, that you can identify if there's a bad gene. Can you manipulate or replace that gene? Is that ethical? Is it something that is really right to change people that way? We shall see. So that's the end of the slide deck. And this is the completion of Chapter 3. This is from the 3rd edition. I would suggest that in addition to the basic material that we just looked at in the slideshow, that you also look at the case study of Richard Speck. Is at the end of the chapter, just before the chapter questions. Also, as always, suggest that you look through the questions that are at the end of the chapter. Some of those questions are actually sources for the discussion questions and your assignment for the week. So, and there's some extra information. There's actually definitions of a lot of the terms that were used in that last section. They're in second edition. For those of you that have the second edition, it has the same things. It seems that there's more definitions in the 3rd edition, so it goes into more detail. So I provided you all with a copy. It's online in the DocShare. If you want to look at that, it's a PDF. You don't have to print it out or anything. Just pull it up on your computer or whatever, and look at it. And it's really good how detailed it is. And also in the front of the chapter, we really didn't talk about it much, but there's actually a cutout there on diet and behavior. And there's been some studies that have found that certain types of foods or poor nutrition, those types of issues impact how people behave. And one of the studies actually changed the diet in the prison system and found that by removing certain things from the prisoner's diet, or at least lowering the amounts, that you could impact how the prisoners behave. So take a look at that as well. Again, one of the videos that we played in class the other night addresses that issue as well, and I'll make them all available to you. If you haven't looked at it, you have access right now. If you click on the bottom of the screen to play this in YouTube, that'll take you to my YouTube channel. And if you look at the Criminology playlist, you'll find all the Adrian Rain videos that I was talking about. The Richard Speck video is not there. I can go in and put it in the playlist. I actually watched that through a different YouTube account, so it's not even in the history if you have access to my history. So again, if you have any questions, you have any issues, problems with the course, problems with the deadlines, problems with your research, understanding the assignments, some of the questions that are in the assignments came right out of the back of the textbook or the back of the chapter. And occasionally I find that some of them are not written in a way that's always understandable to students. So if you do not understand one of these questions, if it makes no sense to you, reach out to me so I can give you a better explanation. When I do identify those things, I will put an explanation, as I did, I believe, in week 1 or week 2, where I put an additional explanation under the question to help people people make sense of it. And I will continue to do that. Also, if you are having any serious issues with the quizzes and the questions, let me know that as well, so I can look at your quiz and make a determination whether that information that's in the quiz question was actually covered. I was going to go into the week 3 quiz and delete any questions that didn't work, but somebody already took it, and I can't manipulate it after somebody already took it. So whatever. I would ask that nobody take the quiz for week 4, because that's not even, we're a totally different chapter. So what I'm going to ask you to do is take no quiz next week, and then take the week 4 quiz in week 5 and go on from there. And it means we'll probably come up short, so I'll just have to, whatever one you don't take, I'll give you credit for it, because it was like, I think, week 7. Now you just go in and take that week 7 one when you're done. But I'll look at that as well to see what it is, because if I'm bumping you up, you're going to miss one quiz grade, because we're not actually covering the chapter, unless I get a test bank and put quiz questions in for chapter 4. But I'll let you know. So again, contact me if you need me. Questions, email, phone call, text message, Dropbox, whatever it is. And hopefully we're all going to be successful.